It was a cold, grey morning when I first realised the world was going to judge me. Hard. I wasn't supposed to succeed, not with the shoes I wore, the ones that barely stayed together, more duct tape than rubber, not with the second-hand clothes that hung off me like I was a walking reminder of every dollar my parents couldn't afford. No, I wasn't meant to be anything more than the quiet kid at the back of the class, just trying to survive. And yet, every day I walked through those high school gates with a sense of dread. Not because of the homework or the exams. No, it was because of them. The popular kids. The ones who had everything I didn't. The ones with the shiny cars, the brand new shoes, the designer bags. The ones who didn't care if I had a backpack with a hole in it. They only cared about how little I had. There was Tyler, the king of the school, it seemed. Tall, athletic, confident. But he wasn't just popular. He was cruel. Every day, he'd find a new way to make me feel smaller. Sometimes it was a cruel joke about my clothes. Other times, it was worse. I'd hear him laugh with his friends as I passed by. "Nice backpack, loser," Tyler would yell, barely holding back his laughter. And they all laughed with him. Every single time. I used to wish I could disappear. But it wasn't just him. The teachers, too, looked at me differently. I saw it in their eyes. The way they'd look past me, like I wasn't worth their time, like I was invisible. I'd ask a question, and they'd give me a dismissive answer. My grades were never good enough. But I kept pushing. The only thing that kept me going was the quiet thought at the back of my mind, I can do this. I didn't have friends in school. I didn't have money to go to parties. I didn't have what everyone else had. But I had something they didn't. A fire. It burned inside of me every day in the silence of my room when I studied. I would write my goals down in a small notebook, the pages filled with dreams of a life that seemed too far out of reach. Get out. Build something. Never forget who said I couldn't. One cold winter day, when I was walking home, I saw Tyler's car. A brand new Mustang, the kind of car I could never afford. It sped past me, and without warning, the tires splashed a huge puddle of slush onto my jeans. I slipped and fell, crashing to the pavement. And what did Tyler do? He honked his horn, laughed, and sped off, leaving me on the ground. His friends in the back seat howled with laughter. That was it. That was the moment I decided that enough was enough. I was tired of being weak, tired of feeling sorry for myself. So I made a promise to myself that day. One day I wouldn't need to rely on them. I would rise above this, and when I did, I would never look back. At home, things weren't any better. My parents worked tirelessly, but it was never enough. The heater in our house didn't work, and we'd wear layers of clothes just to stay warm. But in that small room, under a flickering light, I got to work. I studied every day, every single day. I couldn't afford a new laptop, but I didn't care. I found a cracked tablet at a garage sale, and that became my everything. I spent hours teaching myself how to code, how to build websites, anything that would get me out of the mess I was in. The local library's Wi-Fi became my lifeline, and every time I felt like giving up, I would remember Tyler's face, his cruel laugh. I wouldn't let that define me. And then the day came. The day I got the acceptance letter. A full scholarship. To college. I didn't need to tell anyone. I didn't need applause. Because I had done it for me. But deep down, I knew that even though I had a new chapter ahead, I couldn't forget. I couldn't forget how it felt to be that poor kid laughed at for everything I didn't have. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about proving anyone wrong. It was about showing myself that no matter where I started, I could go as far as I wanted. And I would rise. And when I did, they would see. They would all see. College. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but even there, the past found a way to creep in. I thought the world would be different, but it wasn't. The new dorms, the shared space with roommates who didn't know who I was yet, it all felt like another version of high school, just more grown up. But there was one thing that was different. I was different. I was no longer that kid who'd sat at the back of the class, who'd let the cruel words of others break him down. No. Now, I had a goal. I had ambition. I wasn't just here to get a degree. I was here to change my life. I'd wake up every morning at 6 a.m. while my roommates were still asleep, scrolling through tech blogs, watching coding tutorials, and reading about the latest in Silicon Valley. I knew that was where the future lay. It was 3 a.m. one night when I first stumbled upon an article that would change my life. The title was simple but bold: How to Build a Startup from Scratch in 30 Days. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It wasn't about luck. It wasn't about who you knew. It was about how you could leverage the tools you had and just get started. The idea that success was about action, not waiting for the perfect opportunity, that hit me hard. I didn't have the money to rent an office space. I didn't have a team of investors backing me, but I had an idea, and I had grit. And that was all I needed to begin. The next day, I started sketching out ideas for my startup, a platform to help businesses streamline their operations, to simplify the work of people like me, who were once overlooked and underestimated. I spent days refining the concept, tweaking the business model. Every evening, I went to the library, poring over books on entrepreneurship and leadership. I worked alone at first. I didn't have much to show for my efforts, just a few rough designs and a dream. But I wasn't discouraged. I applied for my first round of seed funding. A lot of rejection emails followed. Every time I got one, I felt a slight sting. But I brushed it off. Every rejection was just one step closer to yes. In my second semester, I met a fellow student, Ethan. He was the kind of guy everyone wanted to be around, charming, confident, and charismatic. He was from a wealthy family, and his startup ideas were getting more attention than mine. One day, as we sat down for coffee, he laughed as he told me about a pitch he had just given to a group of investors. "You know, people just don't get it, man," he said. "They want innovation. They want a big idea that changes the world, and that's exactly what we're giving them." I smiled, trying to hide the envy creeping in. Ethan had everything: the funding, the connections, the confidence. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't be envious. I couldn't let him be the reason I failed. I wasn't him. I wasn't going to wait for someone to give me a seat at the table. I was going to build my own. Days passed, and I kept building. By my final year in college, I had a fully functioning prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, and I had a name for it now: Streamline. I could feel it in my bones. This was going to be huge. I got my first real break when a well-known tech company agreed to partner with me. They saw the potential in my idea and offered me a chance to scale up. That's when the pieces really started to fall into place. I used the connections I had made in college, brought in a small team of developers, and started working on getting Streamline into the hands of businesses across the country. My success wasn't immediate. It wasn't an overnight sensation, but I didn't care. What mattered was that I had something that mattered, something I had built from the ground up. And more importantly, I was no longer that kid from high school who couldn't afford a backpack or a decent pair of shoes. I was a CEO now. I knew that once I reached the top, I'd be able to do what I had always dreamed of. I'd make sure that those who once looked down on me would have to look up. I was ready to show the world that no matter where you start, it doesn't have to define where you end up. Things weren't always easy after I launched Streamline. In fact, there were times when I thought about giving up, wondering if I had been too naive to think that I could make it. But I never stopped. I couldn't afford to. I had something to prove, not just to others, but to myself. The first real hurdle came when we secured our first big client. The deal was huge, and if everything went according to plan, it would bring in a ton of revenue. I worked late nights with my team to make sure everything was flawless. But just when things seemed to be on track, disaster struck. Our servers went down. A technical glitch. Our entire platform crashed. Hundreds of businesses using Streamline were suddenly locked out of their accounts. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was sitting at my desk when the first angry email came through. And then another. And another. The complaints poured in. It was my fault. I had promised these businesses that we were reliable, that we could help them. And here I was, failing them. I wanted to break down, to hide away in a corner and pretend it wasn't happening. But I couldn't. I had been in situations like this before. I had faced failure before, and each time I had pushed through. The team worked around the clock, fixing bugs, restoring service. I sent personal emails to every affected client, apologizing and assuring them we were doing everything possible to get them back on track. And slowly but surely, we did. The platform was restored and business began to flow again. But the damage had been done. Clients had lost trust in us. Our reputation had been tarnished. But I wasn't ready to quit. Not yet. Not when I'd worked so hard to get here. I knew that if I wanted to stay in the game, I had to earn back the trust of my clients and investors. So I got back to work, focusing on what mattered: innovation, customer service, and improving the platform. The next few months were brutal. It was a constant grind of meetings, product improvements, and cold calling potential clients. But I was determined to turn things around. And that's exactly what I did. By the time I graduated, Streamline had recovered from the crisis and was once again growing. We had a small but loyal customer base, and the investors were starting to take notice. Then, out of nowhere, I received a call from a former boss of mine. He was someone I'd worked with during my internship in Silicon Valley years ago, back when I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. "Hey, I've been watching what you've been doing with Streamline," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You've really come a long way." That conversation was a turning point for me. It was the first time I realized that despite all the setbacks, I was being recognized. And it wasn't just from people who had seen me struggle. It was from people who had been in the industry for years, who had made it to the top. The validation felt good, but I knew it was just the beginning. I still had so much more to prove. And that meant scaling up my company, reaching new markets, and securing even bigger clients. I needed capital, and that's when the real challenge began. Venture capitalists. I had heard the stories, how they could make or break a startup. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I had nothing left to lose. I prepared for weeks, working with my team to create the most compelling pitch deck possible. Then the day came. I sat across the table from some of the biggest names in the venture capital world. They were skeptical, as expected. They asked the tough questions, grilled me about every aspect of my business. But I held my ground. I knew my numbers, my vision, and my market. It was a make or break moment. And when I left that room, I was $10 million richer. With that $10 million investment, Streamline was poised to scale, but the journey wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. We expanded our team, moved into a sleek office in downtown San Francisco, and started recruiting top-tier talent. Everyone was excited. The hype was palpable, but with growth came new challenges. We faced stiff competition from established giants in the industry. I remember one meeting in particular. A potential partner, one of the biggest players in our field, invited us to their headquarters. It was the kind of meeting that could change everything. I walked into their pristine office building, knowing that this was my chance to secure the future of Streamline. I spent hours preparing for this pitch. I had the numbers, the data, the stories of success. I knew I could convince them. But when the meeting started, something unexpected happened. They were cold, they were uninterested. "We don't need another small player in this market," one of them said. "Your product is good, but we don't see the value in partnering with you." I was stunned. This was the same company that had been my inspiration when I first started Streamline. I had looked up to them, and now here they were, brushing me aside as if I were nothing. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to tell them they were wrong, that they'd made a mistake, but I held my tongue. There was no point in getting emotional. Instead, I left the meeting calmly, taking the lesson with me. It wasn't the rejection that hurt. It was the realization that I would never be able to count on others to make Streamline a success. If I wanted to win, I had to do it on my own. I returned to the office, more determined than ever. The team rallied behind me. We worked day and night to refine our product and build relationships that didn't rely on the validation of those big players. We were going to do this, even if it meant taking the long road. And then, something amazing happened. A few weeks later, we signed a deal with a small but innovative company, one that saw the potential in us when others didn't. They trusted us to handle their data, and in return, they gave us the platform to prove what we could do. It was a game changer. With that deal, we were able to demonstrate our capabilities to the rest of the industry. The tide began to turn. More clients came on board, more investors took notice. But even as Streamline gained traction, I couldn't escape the shadow of Silicon Valley's cutthroat environment. The competition was fierce. There were days when I felt like I was fighting a battle on all fronts. Every move I made, every decision I took was scrutinized. I couldn't afford to make a single mistake. But I pushed on, never forgetting the pain of my school years, the bullying, the people who doubted me. That pain drove me. Then, a few months later, something unexpected happened. A rival company, one that had always been a thorn in our side, tried to poach my best engineers. They offered them a huge salary, all the perks, and a chance to work on a bigger project. It was the perfect setup. They tried to weaken us, to steal the heart of Streamline. But I wasn't about to let that happen. I knew that losing those engineers would be a huge blow to the company, but I wasn't just going to roll over. I called an emergency meeting. "Here's the deal," I said to my team. "They think they can buy you. They think they can steal everything we've built. But they can't. You're here because you believe in this company. You believe in what we're doing. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away from us." The team rallied. One by one, the engineers came forward, telling me they were staying. They wanted to be part of something bigger than just a paycheck. They wanted to build something that mattered. We fought back and we won. That moment was a turning point for me. It wasn't just about the money, the success, or the deals. It was about the people who believed in me, who believed in the vision of Streamline. And it was about showing the world that I wasn't going to back down. That moment gave me the confidence to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting for what I knew was right. We were going to be bigger than anyone ever thought possible. And nothing, no one, was going to stand in our way. It had been a long road, but I was finally on the edge of the breakthrough I'd dreamed of. Streamline was no longer just a small startup. We were becoming a force to be reckoned with in the industry. The market was starting to notice. Investors were lining up, and the media had started to take an interest in our success. But as the company grew, so did the pressure. The more successful we became, the more eyes were on us. And with that attention came new challenges. People who had once supported me now questioned my every move. The critics came out of the woodwork, eager to see me fail. I remember one specific evening. We were about to close a deal with a major client that would take Streamline to the next level. This was the moment. The deal would cement our place in the industry, and it was all riding on my shoulders. But when I sat down with the client, things didn't go as planned. They had doubts. They weren't sure if we could handle the scale of the project. They weren't convinced that we could deliver on the promises we had made. I tried to convince them, showing them our track record, the success we had achieved with smaller clients. But the doubts were clear in their eyes. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since my school days. Self-doubt. The fear crept in, gnawing at me. What if we weren't ready for this? What if I had overestimated our capabilities? I left that meeting feeling defeated. It felt like everything I had worked for was on the verge of slipping away. The pressure was too much. The weight of running a successful company, of keeping the team together, of proving everyone wrong, it was all starting to catch up to me. But then I remembered something. I remembered the bullies, the people who had told me I'd never amount to anything. I remembered the long nights of studying, the sleepless hours spent building something from scratch. I remembered that I had never given up before, and I wasn't about to give up now. I returned to the office that night with a renewed sense of determination. I called a meeting with the team. "We've faced bigger challenges before," I said. "This isn't the end. It's just another test. We've always fought for what we believe in, and we're not backing down now." The team rallied behind me, and we set to work. We tweaked our proposal, reworked our pitch, and found new ways to address the client's concerns. We didn't just meet their expectations, we exceeded them. The next day, I called the client back. We closed the deal. That victory felt different from all the others. It wasn't just about the success of the company. It was about proving to myself that I could overcome any obstacle. I wasn't just a CEO, I was a survivor. And I had built something bigger than I could have ever imagined. But the victory was bittersweet. As we celebrated, I received a call from a reporter. "We've been hearing rumors that you're planning to sell Streamline. Is it true?" My heart sank. I had never intended to sell. But the media had a different narrative. It was the price of success, the story of a startup founder who'd built something valuable only to sell out when the time was right. I couldn't let that be the story of Streamline. I had worked too hard, fought too many battles to let it all end in a sale. I knew I had to make a decision, stay and continue to build Streamline into the company I had always envisioned, or sell it and walk away from everything I had worked for. The decision wasn't easy, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't sell out, not now, not after everything. So I decided to stay. I called the investors, the board members, and the media. "Streamline is not for sale," I told them. We're just getting started. And with that, I took control of my destiny once again. I wasn't going to let anyone take away what I had built. Streamline was my legacy, and I was determined to make it the greatest success Silicon Valley had ever seen. The decision to stay and fight was more than just a business move. It was a statement that I was no longer the kid who'd been pushed around, overlooked, and doubted. I had earned my place at the table, and I was going to keep it. No one, no investor, no journalist, no one could tell me otherwise. As the weeks passed, I put everything I had into Streamline. I worked with my team around the clock, refining our services, improving our products, and building the kind of company that Silicon Valley would look at and say, that's a company that changed the game. The growth we experienced was astounding. It was as if the universe had aligned for us. Everything we touched turned into gold. Clients were signing on left and right. Our competitors were scrambling to catch up. And the media, the same media that had doubted us, were now calling us the next big thing. But even as the company continued to grow, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was one last hurdle to clear. The final test. The test that would determine whether I could truly succeed in this cutthroat world of Silicon Valley. I had already faced the hardest battles, bullying in school, losing everything when I was younger, fighting for every inch of success. But this was different. This was about proving that I could build something, not just for me, but for everyone who had supported me along the way. It was about proving that I wasn't a fluke, that I wasn't just lucky. I was capable. One morning, I woke up to a call. It was from the biggest tech conglomerate in the world. They were interested in a merger. They wanted to buy Streamline. The offer was astronomical. It was the kind of money that could set me up for life, that could make me a legend in the business world. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. We were at the peak of our success. I had built Streamline into something that even the giants of Silicon Valley wanted to be a part of. But I couldn't just jump at the offer. There had to be more to it than just money. I wanted to make sure that the company I had fought so hard for would continue to thrive after I was gone. I didn't want it to be swallowed up by a conglomerate, forgotten and drowned out by bureaucracy. So I did something unexpected. I countered their offer, not with money, but with a vision. I told them that if they wanted to merge with Streamline, they would have to let me keep control. I would remain the CEO. I would keep the vision intact. The offer was bold. It was audacious. But it worked. They accepted. And with that, Streamline entered into a merger that would change the tech world forever. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new era for me, for Streamline, and for everyone who had been with me through the ups and downs. As I stood in the boardroom, signing the final papers that would solidify the merger, I couldn't help but think back to those early days, when I was just a kid, laughed at and pushed aside. How far I had come, how much I had achieved, how much I had proven not just to the world, but to myself. And that, I realized, was the true reward. The money, the success, the recognition, it was all secondary. What truly mattered was that I had achieved something that no one could take away from me. I had built something from nothing, fought for it every step of the way, and come out on top. As I looked around the room, I saw my team, the people who had believed in me when no one else did. They had been there from the beginning, and together, we had changed everything. I wasn't just a CEO, I was a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of determination, and the belief that no matter how many times you fall, you can always get back up. And so, I made a promise to myself that day. I promised to never forget where I came from, to never forget the people who helped me get there, and to always keep pushing, always keep fighting, no matter how high I climbed. Because in the end, success wasn't about the title. It wasn't about the money. It was about proving that you can overcome anything. And I had done just that.